One of the benefits of the NEC contract is that it's a suite of contracts that all comes together and you can mix and match different options for different circumstances and different types of project. But it seems to me that some of the options aren't really used as much as some of the others, and I'm thinking particularly of option B and option D, which are the ones that are based around the bill of quantities. John, in your experience, is that right?
Yeah, it is right. They are much less used, although when the NEC3, or the NEC I should say, first came out, option B was the one that the clients used most because it was most like the ICE fifth conditions at the time. But then clients seemed to migrate over to option A and then on to option C, and never really got into option D. For me, the main, or a big reason is that I think that the option B clauses, which are shared by the option D clauses, are actually quite poorly written, in that you can end up with two rates for the same item of work. So if a quantity times final rate is more than 0.5% of the total of the prices at the contract date, which is only £5,000 on £1 million contract, then for the original quantity, the contractor's paid the original rate, but for the changed quantity, it's basically a new rate based on the change in defined cost plus fee. So you end up with two rates. That, I think, is one of the reasons why option B is not used. When you go to option D, you've got those same provisions for calculating the target prices, so it's a running total almost, and you have to do the open book accounting, if you like, to reimburse the contractor their defined cost plus fee. So it's very administratively burdensome, option D.
So Ian, with all that in mind, are there circumstances where you would recommend to a client that actually options B and D are going to be right for them?
Yeah, I think certainly in respect of option B, the remeasurement contract has a place. So if you know the type of work you're doing, just not the extent of it, so you're doing some excavation work, you know the type of excavation that's going to be undertaken, but you can't determine the quantity accurately, then option B's got a place, because in that situation, maybe the employer wants to take the risk of the quantities, both positive and negative. So option B, absolutely. Option D, probably less so in fairness, in that under option C, the risk of the quantities is shared through the pay and gain process. Under option D, the employer takes that risk. Again, positive and negative, but I can, if you're going down the target cost route and you're trying to share a lot of the risks, then quantity, I think, is one that commonly can be shared. But there may be the exceptional circumstance again, whereby you do know the nature of the work, not the extent of it, and you do want to have a target because it's sufficiently large in size, etc. But really, if it is going to be remeasurable, the actual variance and what could be from part of the pay and gain, where savings can be made, is somewhat reduced because the employer is taking all the risk around the quantities.
And I think John said that option B is most like other traditional forms of contract. Could you use that as almost a baby step into the use of the NEC from having traditionally used something more like the JCT or a FIDIC, because it's more aligned to the same sorts of background theories?
Yeah, I would think that there's some truth in that you've got that sort of standard bill of quantities that's recognised in those more traditional forms. But it is a baby step, I think. I mean, the NEC is a considerable change with many new concepts compared to the traditional ICE, JCT suites.
So if we don't see B and D very much, what do we see more? Is it A, C, or E, or even F, I suppose? I mean, personally, I've seen F used once or twice, no more than that. But John?
A and C, the main one that I see used. But having said that, just going back to looking at the whole suite of the families, in terms of using a bill of quantities option, the short contracts and the provisions in there for simple contracts, where actually it is measuring quantities and costs are much more proportional to quantities, the short contracts, I don't have any problems with the clauses in the short contract for bills of quantities.
So what you're saying really is you can't just get locked into that main contract form. You've got to consider the options down the rest of the supply chain and in the simpler forms of contract as well, depending on the project type. Moving on from that a little, where are the benefits then to using an NEC option B over a JCT with a bill of quantities?
Well, I think for me it's the the overriding benefits that the contract brings, regardless of main option, around the stimulus to good project management, the early warnings, the process for dealing with change as and when it occurs, driving that proactivity. Those are the real sort of key benefits that come through the contract, regardless of main option.
One thing that I think a lot of people struggle with is when you've got a complex process of procurement, getting locked in too early to a particular form or particular set of options. Do you often see projects being broken down into stages where you might have one stage on an option E cost reimbursable and then going through to a target cost or a fixed price contract, John?
I think you see projects being broken down into packages, and different packages have different risk characteristics, and the intelligent client will use different members of the family, different main options, possibly even different secondary options, depending on the characteristics of that package. It's only really in some more emergency projects where we've got to do something fast, cost reimbursable, get on site, start doing something. Oh, now we've got a bit more certainty and we want a motivation for the contractor to perform, where you switch or move over to an option C target contract or an option A fixed price contract.
So summarising the issues that came out of that discussion, I think we're all agreed that we don't see option D very much, and there's probably not an awful lot of positive incentive to use option D. Option B is slightly different. We do see a little bit more. There's more benefit derived from option B for a client procuring under it. But to think of it in terms of being comparable to one of the traditional forms of bill of quantities based contracts is a misstep. And it's still quite fundamentally different in approach because it's still NEC at its heart. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.